Yo, what's up guys, it's the Anime Titan here, back at it again with another What If, and today I will be doing What If Deku had a sound quirk, part 4 I believe. So last time we left off, which was quite a while ago if I do say so, about 2 weeks, no, more, about a month ago, yeah. I do apologize for that, schoolwork has been strenuous and I am trying to keep up as best I can. So anyway, last time we left off was when Deku was in the hospital and Kyoka had just confessed that she liked him, with Deku as well. So we just gonna go ahead and time skip that 1 week, and Deku has actually missed a concert. The people are wondering what had happened to Clover, but Deku did post something saying that he would be back, he just had a bit of a medical issue. And hopefully some of you guys have realized in the thumbnail that will be Deku's hero costume. The gauntlets on his arm will release sound waves, as well as the core reactor that you see on his chest will the core on his chest will be harnessing sound waves. There's also basically repulsors on his feet that use sound to levitate him off the ground. So basically, yeah. And the Kyoka cuteness in the other side, which is, not gonna lie, I actually do like that photo. But anyway, Deku had updated that he will not miss the next gig and that he just had a bit of a medical problem. So we're just gonna go ahead back into the school. Deku's been out of school for about 5 days and has missed quite a bit of work, which Kyoka had actually brought him to catch up on. Izuku was grateful for this, and when he returned, he was all caught up on work, and Aizawa had then told him and the entire class about the up-and-coming sports festival, that they had a chance to show off what they had and how good, basically what they have and what they could become. Deku was, as well as the rest of the class, was excited at this, except for Todoroki, who looked over at Deku and said that he declares war on Midoriya. Midoriya would have been a little confused at this, seeing as Todoroki was always so stoic. This is when Todoroki would say that, "By far I can see that you are the strongest and most hardworking in the class. I will beat you and take the #1 spot." This is when Bakugo would jump out of his seat yelling, saying, "Oh no you don't, you damn well don't. Izuku is my prey, my target. If anybody's gonna kick his ass, it's gonna be me." As Izuku would just look at the two and then laugh. Izuku would then have gone off as, well, the class would have ended as per normal, with them trying to leave and then being bombarded by the other class. Izuku was quite annoyed at this, seeing as he wanted to get home quickly and he wanted to go check up on his mom in the hospital. He asked them to move politely, but they wouldn't. So Izuku decided that he would need to show them that he was not somebody who you just ignore, as he would release a small burst of sound, sending all of them back onto their behinds, as he'd walk through the crowd and tell them, "I have somewhere to be," as he would walk off quite, well, annoyed, with Kyoko following suit, telling him that that really wasn't necessary. Izuku would then tell her that it actually was. He needs to get to the hospital quick. He needs to get to the hospital, not quickly, but he needs to get to the hospital before the time runs out. As Kyoko would ask him, what does he mean, as he'd once again bring up his mother who's in the hospital. Izuku would have taken the time and he would have made it to the hospital with Kyoka, as he would have checked in and went to visit his mother. She was doing so much better now, and within another week's time she would be released. Izuku would have gone and he would have gone into the room, as Kyoka would as well. Inko smiling, saying that, "Oh, you finally have a girlfriend now, Izu. The first one, I might say." Kyoka, hearing this, would blush a little, hearing that she was his the first girl that he'd ever brought to his mother, as Izuku would say, "Come on, Mom. Anyway, how are you?" as she would reply with, "She's doing just fine, and the doctor said that within a week she could be released." Izuku would be extremely happy at this. Sorry for the pause, guys. So yeah, Izuku would be extremely happy hearing that his mother would be coming home in a week, as he would remember that he actually needs to prepare the house. It is quite a bit filthy. As he would proceed to speak with his mom for a bit, as Kyoko would, well, she would be there and she would join in on the conversation, with Izuku's mother asking a bunch of awkward questions. Kyoko wouldn't really mind, but Izuku would be kinda blushing heavily, as his mom's kinda spilling all of the little secrets from the past. But anyway, Izuku would finish speaking to his mom at about 5, as he would leave and he would walk Kyoko to her apartment, which wasn't very far from the hospital, about 3 or 4 blocks, as he would drop off and he'd wave her goodbye just before Kyoko would end up running back to him and giving him a kiss on the cheek, telling him that if he ever does stupid things again, that she had permission from his mother to beat the living hell out of him. Izuku would then ask her if she had brought up the USJ, as Kyoko would say no, she did her best to avoid that, with Izuku saying thank you, as he would hug her and then proceed to leave. He would have gotten home and it would have been filthy as hell, as he would start cleaning up, picking up all the clothes lying around, finish up doing what's left of the dishes, and he would just mop and sweep the floor, cleaning everything before he would inevitably make himself something to eat and then go to bed. Izuku would wake up the next morning feeling much more refreshed and energized, as he would pop out of bed, do his daily rituals, brushing his teeth, getting ready, and he would head off to school. This is when he'd walk back into class, and Aizawa would tell them to start preparing for the sports festival and that he wishes them luck. I'm not sure the sport festival is supposed to move that fast, but I don't give a damn. I'm trying to skip through real quick because I have a special thingy that I want to get to. Whoop-de-doodle fucking do. But anyway, so, yeah. Izuku and them would have gotten dressed in their sports gear, as Izuku would have been the first one to, well, get dressed, and he would be sitting in the locker room with Todoroki, then again reminding him that I will be winning, Izuku, with Izuku telling him that we're all gonna try our best, Todoroki. Don't be so sure. As Todoroki would have smiled, seeing that Izuku didn't lose much of his attitude. Bakugo, on the other hand, would jump at Izuku, telling him that, I swear I'll beat you, Deku! As Izuku would tell him that, Kachan, we're actually not that different. I've got sound. You've got explosions. Explosion makes sound. I can manipulate said sound. And I can hit you with it. As, yeah, Bakugo would have realized that Izuku has basically control over a wide variety of things, seeing as there's a lot of stuff that makes sound. Izuku can't manipulate it like matter manipulation, like Overhaul has, where he can create anything out of it. No, Izuku can basically just use the sound to either slow you down or speed you up, or just to knock you back. But anyway, Izuku and them would have gotten ready, as they would have walked out on stage with, I don't remember, who was class rep? Well, nah, fuck it, let's just go with Izuku. With Izuku telling him that he wishes for all of them to do their best and show off just exactly how powerful they are in their own right, and that this sports festival isn't about anybody showing off their power, but just for everybody to have fun and do their best, and that he wishes for all of them to go beyond plus ultra. As the crowd would have been a little shell-shocked that he would not have declared war, but he would have told them to do their best, as the crowd would then erupt with cheers, and the rest of the UA first years would have a bit more respect for Midoriya. Monoma still being the dick he is. But anyway, we all know Monoma. Anyway, Izuku would then go and join the students again with Midnight spinning the roulette wheel, and it would land on the obstacle course. Everybody would have lined up in the tunnel, as they would have gotten ready to run, with with Midnight yelling, 3, 2, 1, go! As Shoto would have tried to flash freeze everybody, but some would have gotten away, this being Izuku, who immediately used his sound to burst off of the ground and through an opening in the ice, as well as Bakugo, who blew up the ice before it hit him. Shoto would have been, oh, sorry guys, it's like, 9:07? Yeah, and I didn't wake up too long ago, so yeah, first thing in the morning, let's roll. So anyway, Izuku would have been out ahead of, Shoto would have been out ahead of everybody, with Izuku gaining close suit and Bakugo doing the same. Izuku would have used his sound to levitate off the ground ever so slightly while moving forward, with Bakugo just flying with explosions. Shoto would have seen these two gaining on him, as he knew that he couldn't hit either of them with his ice or freeze them in place, seeing as they were both off the ground. They would be zooming past real quick, and that's when they would reach the 0 pointers, with Izuku, who had his quirk evolve quite a bit due to the strenuous fight against the Nomu, would hold out both his hands as the sound would distort a little bit, and then proceed to knock over the Nomu with a loud boom. Shoto would freeze it, and Bakugo would blow up some Nomus and maneuver around them, with Izuku just maneuvering around them. Izuku would then end up taking the first place, with Shoto second and Bakugo close in... close in third. The other students by now would have gotten out, and they would be catching up quite quickly, and Shoto and Bakugo would be kind of pissed at this, but Izuku would be fine. Izuku would then make it to the the bottomless pit and the pillars, as he would use one massive sound explosion, sending himself skyrocketing through the air and landing on one of the center pillars, before doing it again and landing on the pillar just beyond the outside. He would then let out a smaller sound wave as he would make it to the other side, with Prison Mike saying that Izuku Midoriya has crossed the bottomless something and will now be making it onto the minefield. Shoto and Bakugo would be close behind Izuku, as Bakugo would now have overtaken Izuku and would be in Shoto, and would be in second place. Izuku would start running near the minefields, but Bakugo would just fly over him, using his explosions, and Shoto would end up freezing Izuku, seeing as he was now running and not using his sound to levitate. Shoto would quickly freeze Izuku in place, as he would pass Izuku. Izuku would be kind of pissed at this, and he would use his sound waves to basically shatter the ice, as he'd chase after Shoto and Bakugo. With Izuku would yell out, "You bastards, you're cheating!" Bakugo would reply with, "I'm not cheating, Deku, I just overtook you." Shoto would look back, and he would just scoff. Izuku would decide that he would be a little bit smarter at this, as he would set off multiple explosions, and then use the force as well as the sound to push himself forward, catching up to a second place Todoroki, and then he would shoot past Todoroki using the exact same method and end up making it to Bakugo, where he'd get up nice close, where he'd rocket himself into the air and then blast Bakugo with a sound wave, knocking him down to the ground before he would let out an even larger sound wave, not skyrocketing him, but launching him straight through to the finish line, with Shoto coming in second and Bakugo in third. The other students would eventually start pouring in, and Prison Mike would have announced that Izuku was first, with Shoto Todoroki and Bakugo Katsuki following suit. Everybody would have roared, the crowd would have erupted with cheers, hearing that Izuku Midoriya had already made it out, as well as Shoto Todoroki and Bakugo Katsuki. The other students would be pouring in, and everything would be going well. This is when Midnight would tell them that they should all quickly take a little breather, waiting for the rest of the students to come in. The rest of the students would eventually finish filling up, and the others would eventually be eliminated. She would then go over to the roulette wheel once again as she'd spin it. This time it would land on the cavalry battle. Izuku would have been They would then explain the rules that you may not forcefully push people, or if you may not force people to leave their horse, and the only way to win is for the most headbands. They would then say that Izuku had 10 million points, a 10 million point headband, and everybody would be looking at him. Izuku's team would be similar to Canon, with it being Mei Hatsume, Ochaku Uraraka, Fumakage Tokuyami, and him. Fuck. Sorry guys. You see, this is what happens when a South African misses his morning cup of coffee. I'm just joking. It's not all South Africans. It's just like, I really need my morning cup of coffee, and I don't want to get out of my bed, because then my dad's gonna end up sending me around to do shit, and I don't list for that right now. But enough about me. Anyway, yeah. So, Izuku's team would have been exactly as in Canon, and the other teams would as well. This is when things would start, and Izuku's team would be targeted by many, but as soon as they would get close or try to snatch the headband, Izuku would let out a burst of sound, knocking them away. Tokuyami would be sure to block any long-range attacks, as Izuku would block the long range and Tokuyami would take care of the close range. Ochaku would have made them all significantly faster as well by making them light, and Mei Hatsume would have still used the flight. And I knew eventually that would pop. Okay, so we're at 16 minutes. Okay, so Izuku would basically just have been avoiding most people, but that's when out of nowhere a large explosion could be heard, and Izuku would look around frantically as he'd hear Bakugo coming from above him. Bakugo had used his explosions to launch off of his team and straight at Deku, as Bakugo would then yell, "I'm coming for you, Deku! Those points are mine!" Izuku would know that Bakugo wasn't messing around, as he'd quickly launch himself into the air as well, as not to strain his teammates who are carrying him from the massive sound explosion that he was about to let out. He would have launched up, and then he would launch the massive sound explosion, redirecting Bakugo in a completely different direction, this being straight at Todoroki. Bakugo would have as well seen Todoroki as an enemy, as he would have decided to forget about Deku now, but to take down the icy hot bastard, as he would charge straight in. Deku would use his sound to slow his descent all the way back to his team, as they would continue. Izuku had decided that he wouldn't be taking any other team's headband, other team's points, seeing as he most likely didn't need it at the time. So basically, everything would be going mostly to Canon, except for when Todoroki had encased Midoriya in the wall of ice. Hang on, guys. Fuck me. Okay, so Todoroki would have encased them in the wall, surrounded them by a wall of ice, as him and Midoriya would proceed to battle for the 10 million points. This, however, wouldn't be going very well in Todoroki's favor, seeing as every time he'd launch a piece of ice at Deku would just shatter it using a high-frequency sound pitch, which Todoroki was pissed at, but he understood that sound was basically his ice's natural weakness. So yeah, Ida would eventually try Kaminari would eventually zap with a lightning bolt, with Tokuyami still blocking it using Dark Shadow, and Ida would then use the Recipro Burst. Ida would use the Recipro Burst, and this is when it would come down to pure reaction speed. Todoroki would launch straight at Midoriya, and he would try to grab the headband, but just before he could, Izuku would blast Todoroki with a sound blast, slightly shifting him off-center, causing Todoroki to miss the 10 million point headband. But in turn, Deku had grabbed one of his, as this would put Todoroki down into third place, as Izuku would decide that they need to move now. As Izuku would quickly, and I mean quickly, he would use a sound, he would tell Uraraka to make them all weightless, as he'd launch sound from the ground, sending them over the wall, along with Mei Hatsume's jetpack. As they'd land and then maneuver around a few more teams, as Prison Miyagi would yell out that the cavalry battle has ended. The scores are as follow. Midoriya in first place, Bakugo in second, Todoroki in third, and the rest would go as canon. This is when they would proceed to have their lunch break, seeing as most of them would probably be tired and hungry. As Izuku would be heading out for lunch, but would be stopped by All Might, as he would tell him that he's doing really good so far. This is when he'd be walking, and Shoto would step up and say, "Well done, Midoriya. I have to give it to you. You did well." As Izuku would say, "Thanks, but I really don't deserve it as much." And it's basically it. All I can tell you is that you have to work your hardest, and if you don't, then you'll never achieve anything in life. As Todoroki would have realized that he's kind of being a dick for only using half his quirk, but he still would stick with the resolve that he will not use his fire. Izuku would end up going for his lunch break, as he would be, while Midnight would spin the Russian roulette wheel, and it would, not the Russian roulette, just the roulette wheel, as it would end up going on the 1v1 battles. But anyway, so the first matchup would be as canon, Shinzo versus Izuku. Izuku would have been warned by, I think it was Ojiro. Was it Ojiro? Let's have a look. It's Ojiro, right? Ojiro. Ojiro. Search. Yeah, Ojiro. I knew it. I'm a genius. I'm a fucking genius. Fuck you. Suckers. Yeah, he would have been warned by Ojiro that Shinzo has brainwashing, and that it's not wise to speak to him. Izuku would have listened to his warning, as he would pick something up and put it in his pocket. This will be revealed a little later, but you'll find out. Izuku would then walk up on stage, with Shinzo already being there. This is when Midnight would tell them to begin. Izuku would be walking at Shinzo, and Shinzo would be damn fearful, as he'd start talking, telling him that it must be wonderful to have such a good quirk. His parents are probably proud of him, and he's lucky to have gotten into the hero course. This wouldn't have bothered Izuku much, except the fact that he would have been annoyed that Shinzo would have brought his parents into it. He would then continue walking, and Shinzo would become a little bit more, how do I put it, fearful. So anyway, Shinzo would then start frantically panicking, as he'd say, "I see you've been going out with that weird earphone jack girl. Isn't she just awkward? How could anybody love her? I mean, she looks so different." As this would have ticked off Izuku. He would have been much more annoyed. Hang on, pause. Izuku would have been annoyed now, as he'd walk up to Shinzo and prepare an attack, but Shinzo would then yell out, "So I hear your mom's in the hospital." As this would have ticked off Izuku, he would have yelled out, "What the hell did you say?" As this would have answered Shinzo, he would have answered Shinzo's question, the fact that if your mom was in the hospital. Shinzo would have then gotten Izuku in his mind control, as he would have told Izuku, "Turn around and walk off the stage." Izuku would be walking off the stage, but he'd be violently fighting in his head, cursing himself for listening and falling for his trick. But this is when he'd look around. He'd see Kyoka, as he'd hear her yelling, "You got this, Izuku!" Izuku doesn't need his body to control sound, as he would use the sound from Kyoka, bursting it forward sending it directly at himself, knocking him over. As Shinzo would have wondered what the hell just happened. As he'd ask, what the hell was that? Izuku would have gotten up pissed, and he wouldn't have wasted time, as he'd quickly launch at Shinzo, and he'd blast Shinzo with a sound wave, sending him out of the arena. Not hurting Shinzo, just out of the arena. This is when Izuku would walk over to Shinzo and say, I wasn't born with a powerful quirk. My quirk was weak at first. All I could do was manipulate my vocal cords to sound different. I trained it. Really trained it. I trained my body. And now, my quirk is powerful because I've worked hard. Have you worked hard, Shinzo? Have you picked up any martial arts classes? Have you decided on what would happen if your quirk doesn't work? No, otherwise this fight would have gone very, very differently. As Izuku would have turned around and walked away, these words would have hit Shinzo on a different plane, realizing that the kid wasn't born with a strong quirk. He worked his quirk to that point. And here he was complaining that he has a strong quirk, but can't get into the hero course. He should have picked up training. But this is when Izuku would just walk off stage, being pissed. He'd make it back up to the waiting areas, as every other match would go to Canon. So let's jump into the next round. Izuku was in the waiting room getting ready. As he would, Bakugo would walk in, and he would realize it's the wrong waiting room. As he'd look over at Izuku and say, Oi, nerd, don't you dare lose, you hear me? As Izuku would say, not planning on it, Kachan. As he'd walk out and give Bakugo a fist bump, before he would cross paths with Endeavor. This is when Endeavor would speak up, telling Izuku that, you're fighting my Shoto next. Make him use his fire. He's been neglecting it for a while now. It's just a phase, but he doesn't seem to want to grow out of it. Just make him use his fire. Izuku would have been annoyed that Endeavor was bossing him around, as he would then just proceed to tell him that if Shoto wanted to use his fire, he would have. Don't make your burden mine. As he'd walk off, Endeavor would be visibly pissed as he'd yell out, What the hell did you just say to me? Izuku would then use Endeavor's loud mouth against him as he'd blast the sound that came from Endeavor, which was echoing through the halls, might I add, right back at him, as he'd walk out onto the stage, while leaving Endeavor just 2 feet further away, because he knocked him back about 2 feet. Endeavor would have been shocked that happened, but he would have brushed it off as nothing but a lucky shot. As Izuku would have made it out to the arena? Yeah, the arena. Let's just go with that. Massive concrete square that they fight on, with Shoto already waiting there. This is when Shoto would ask him what took him so long. Izuku would reply with, Your dad. He had a favor to ask. As Shoto would say, let me guess. He wants you to make me use my fire. Well, make me use his fire. Izuku would say, yes, but I told him that he should make his burden mine, and knocked him back about 2 feet using his own loud mouth. Shoto would have laughed at this, as well as the crowd being like, what are they talking about? Midnight would then proceed to tell them, begin. Shoto would then launch a flurry of glacier-like ice spikes towards Izuku, with Izuku using his sound to either shatter them, or just wrapping his fists in sound and then punching straight at the ice. Shoto would have seen that his ice isn't being very effective, and he would have been a bit annoyed, but he would keep trying. Eventually it would come to the point where Shoto was physically shivering and ice had formed all over his left side. Izuku would look at Shoto, barely tired, as he'd tell him that, look, Shoto, I don't agree with your dad at all. I don't like him to begin with. But this is your quirk, Shoto. You really shouldn't be, you shouldn't be messing around like this. You should be going at 100% like the rest of us. I'm a friend of yours and all, but I find it really disrespectful at the fact that you're not respecting me enough to use the full power of your quirk, not his, but your quirk, to fight me. I find that a little disrespectful. Shoto would have looked up at Izuku and he would have said, "What the hell do you mean?" As Izuku would then ramp on like saying, "Okay, so answer me this, Shoto. Whenever you use your fire, does it come out of endeavor to you? I don't think so. Whenever you use your fire, does endeavor control it? I don't think so. Whenever you use your fire, does endeavor increase or decrease the temperature? I highly doubt that. It is from your body. Your father might have a hellfire quirk, and your mother might have had an ice quirk, but you don't have your mother's quirk. You don't have your father's quirk. You have your quirk. A half and half quirk. A combination of your parents' quirk. An evolution of your parents' quirk. And you're disrespecting yourself and me in this fight by not using your quirk." Shoto would have then had a little bit of a flashback, thinking that Izuku's correct. It is my quirk. This is when Shoto would look up at Izuku and tell him, "Thank you. You've brought me to the realization that I've just been ignoring a part of myself this entire time." This is when Shoto would burst out. Well, Shoto's left side, right side. I think left. Yeah, the left side. Hang on. Let's pop a check, shall we? My Hero Academia. Shoto. Please ignore all the photos. Yeah. Hang on, let me just. Yeah, Shoto's left side would burst into flames. Endeavor would be extremely happy at this, yelling, "Go, Shoto!" before Shoto would look at him and say, "Shut up, Endeavor!" The crowd would have been shocked at this, as Izuku would say, "Now we'll fight." Shoto would have launched a massive fireball straight towards Izuku, with Izuku blasting a solid hole through it using his sound. Shoto would have been happy to see that Izuku didn't lose his will to fight, and the two would be going all out, with Shoto constantly shooting a flurry of fire and ice attacks, and Izuku shattering the ice and then just shooting holes through the fire. Eventually, Shoto would end up freezing Izuku's leg, and the fire would be heading towards him, with Izuku just cancelling out the fireball, but then get hit by a massive glacier of ice. Izuku had decided that he wasn't going to mess around anymore, and Shoto decided that he wouldn't either. Shoto would use his massive flash fire, or the flash, I don't even know what that attack was, but the massive attack that he used in Canon, with Izuku distorting the sound around him yet again, as well as using the sound from the crowd, who was now roaring in anticipation to charge up his attack. The two attacks would collide, with Cemento still trying to dampen the effect, and the two attacks would clash, leaving a massive explosion and wall of dust and smoke in its wake. The dust would eventually slowly clear to see that Shoto was blown directly out of bounds, and Izuku was just barely hovering off the ground using his sound quirk, drifting in and out of consciousness, falling lower, but then floating up higher again, as he would symbolize that he is not out yet. He would eventually just float over to the ring, and then would collapse in the ring. But Knight would then pronounce Izuku the victor, as the crowd would erupt in cheers. And it is actually 34 minutes, and this is where I'll be ending it off. Hope you guys enjoyed. This is the Anime Titan signing out. Deuces, and have a nice day.